They mocked me when my wife referred to me as not being a real man at that upscale restaurant. Meanwhile, while she was busy cheating with her tennis coach, I was quietly shifting millions through offshore accounts and constructing an empire she never even knew about. The black Mercedes that picked me up? That was only the start. My name is Russell Doyle. I'm 42 years old and have spent the past 15 years establishing a solid reputation as a tax planning expert here in Phoenix. It's not the most glamorous job, but it pays well and has given my family a comfortable lifestyle. I know every loophole in the tax code, every way to move money legally and discreetly. People trust me with their financial matters because I'm the guy who stays quiet and gets things done. That Thursday night in October started like any other. Celeste had been planning this dinner at Romano's for weeks, some celebration for her friend's promotion. She bought a new dress, spent 2 hours getting ready, and was practically bouncing with anticipation. I came straight from the office, still dressed in my business casual clothes, khakis, polo shirt, and the understated confidence that comes from knowing you can solve problems most people don't even realize they have. The restaurant was packed with Scottsdale's high society. Women dripping in jewelry they couldn't afford and men boasting loudly about their golf handicaps. Our table was at the heart of it all, perfectly placed for maximum attention. Celeste loved being seen, loved being the center of attention. I always found it amusing, her need for an audience. The conversation flowed like expensive wine, gossip about neighbors, complaints about contractors, the usual suburban drama. I sat quietly, nursing my beer, watching the spectacle. That's when Celeste's voice rose above the noise, clear as day and twice as cutting. "Russell's absolutely great with the kids," she said, gesturing toward me with her wine glass. "He's patient, responsible, never misses a soccer game. But let's be real, girls, he's not exactly a real man." Laughter swept across the table like a wave. Sharp, knowing laughter from women who thought they understood the punchline. I felt every eye at the table turn toward me, waiting for my response, waiting to see if I would defend myself or just take it like the good little husband I was expected to be. I did neither. Instead, I reached into my wallet, pulled out my credit card, and placed it on the table. The waiter appeared instantly. They always do when they see platinum. I signed the receipt without glancing at the total, folded my napkin, and stood up. "Russell, don't be dramatic," Celeste said, but her voice had lost some of its sharpness. "You know I'm just teasing." I looked down at her, then at her friends, and then back at her. "No," I said quietly. "You're not." I walked out of Romano's into the warm Arizona night, pulled out my phone, and sent a single text message. 3 minutes later, a black Mercedes rolled up to the curb. The driver's window rolled down, revealing a woman I had hoped I'd never have to contact. "Hello, Russell," Nora Finch said. "Ready to get started?" I slid into the passenger seat of Nora's Mercedes, the leather still warm from the Arizona heat. The air conditioning hummed quietly, a stark contrast to the chaos I'd just left behind at Romano's. Through the tinted windows, I could see Celeste and her friends gathered at the restaurant entrance, their animated gestures telling me everything I needed to know about their conversation. "So," Nora said, pulling away from the curb with practiced ease, "she finally gave you the opening you needed." I nodded, watching the restaurant shrink in the side mirror. 15 years, Nora. 15 years I've been the dependable husband, the good father, the invisible man who makes everything run behind the scenes. Nora Finch wasn't just any lawyer. She was the kind of attorney wealthy people called when they needed problems to vanish quietly. We had crossed paths 5 years ago when I helped restructure a client's assets to reduce tax exposure. Professional respect had turned into something more complex, something we both agreed to keep strictly business when I mentioned I was married. "You know this changes everything," she said, turning onto Camelback Road. "Once we start this process, there's no turning back." "I found the photos 3 weeks ago," I said, my voice steady despite the weight of the admission. Hidden in her jewelry box, printed as if she wanted to savor them. Her and that tennis instructor, Dwayne Morrison. Not just kissing, we're talking full romantic getaway. Nora's grip on the steering will tighten slightly. "Evidence is useful, but you'll need more than photos to get what you want in Arizona. It's a no-fault state, remember. That's where my job comes in handy." I replied, "I've been tracking our finances for months. Every spa visit, every shopping spree, every mysterious dinner with the girls. Turns out she's been funding quite the lifestyle for Mr. Morrison. Personal training gear, a new car lease. Even a weekend in Sedona, she told me, was a girl's trip. We pulled into the parking garage of a downtown office building I had never noticed before. Nora handed the keys to a valet who appeared out of nowhere, nodding at her like they had done this before. The elevator to the 42nd floor needs a special key, she said, pulling a black card from her purse. My firm specializes in sensitive matters, clients who require complete confidentiality. As we rode up in silence, I reflected on Celeste's words echoing in that restaurant. Not a real man. She had no clue what kind of man she'd just triggered. For 15 years, I had been the quiet one, the supportive one, the one who dealt with the dull details while she lived her Instagram-perfect life. Phase 1 starts tonight, Nora said as the elevator doors opened. By morning, she'll realize her perfect little world is built on quicksand. The next morning arrived with typical Phoenix intensity, blazing sun and air that felt like breathing through silk. I made coffee, packed lunches, and drove the kids to school just like any other Friday. The routine felt surreal after what had happened at Romano's, but that was the point. Real power doesn't announce itself through drama. Celeste was still asleep when I left. She'd come home late, smelling of wine and desperation, trying to turn our bedroom into a scene from a romance novel. I played along, letting her believe her little act had smoothed things over. She had no idea I was recording everything. Audio quality courtesy of the latest surveillance technology Nora had provided. My office occupied a corner suite in a Scottsdale high-rise, all glass and steel, reflecting the desert mountains. By 9 a.m., I was deep in the meticulous work of financial surgery. Every account, every investment, every asset we'd accumulated over 15 years was being quietly reassigned, restructured, protected. Russell Doyle's office, my assistant Janet announced through the intercom. Your 10 o'clock appointment is here. Dr. Iris Whitman entered my office with the confidence of someone who'd spent decades uncovering people's secrets. She was Nora's recommendation, a child psychologist with an impeccable reputation and very specific expertise in custody evaluations. Mr. Doyle, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. I've reviewed the preliminary materials Miss Finch provided. Your situation is more common than you might think. How common? I asked. Successful, quiet men married to women who mistake stability for weakness. It's an epidemic among the professional class. She opened a leather portfolio. Your children are 14 and 12, correct? Old enough to understand family dynamics. Young enough to be influenced by the parent who provides the most security. I nodded. They've already started asking questions. Emma noticed the tension, and Jake keeps asking why mommy seems angry all the time. Children are remarkably perceptive, Dr. Whitman said. They see through performances adults think are foolproof in custody situations. I've found that kids tend to gravitate toward the parent who represents consistency and emotional stability. She handed me a business card. I'll need to conduct some informal observations, family dinners, homework sessions, regular interactions, nothing that would alert your wife, but enough to establish patterns. And if she objects? She won't, Dr. Whitman replied. Celeste will see a respected professional taking interest in her family's well-being. She'll want to impress me, which means she'll reveal exactly what kind of mother she really is when she thinks she's being evaluated. By noon, I had restructured 3 shell companies, moved 2 major investments into protected trusts, and scheduled a meeting with our children's school counselor. Every move was legal, every step documented, every decision designed to build an unassailable foundation for what was to come. Celeste texted around 1 p.m., lunch with the girls. Don't wait up for dinner. I smiled at my phone and typed back. Have fun, sweetheart. She had no idea she was funding her own destruction. 1 credit card swipe at a time. Saturday morning brought the first crack in Celeste's perfect facade. I was making pancakes, Emma's favorite, when she wandered into the kitchen with her phone, clutched against her chest like it contained state secrets. Russell, she said, her voice carrying the strain women get when they're trying to sound casual about something important. Bryn called me last night. Bryn called. Well? I flipped a pancake with practiced ease. Everything okay? She asked. She wanted to know about your business. Said she'd never really understood what you do for work. Celeste poured herself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. I told her you do taxes and stuff, but she kept asking questions. Weird questions. Emma bounded into the kitchen, saving me from having to respond. Dad, these smell amazing. Only the best for my princess, I said, sliding a perfect golden pancake onto her plate. Your mom was just telling me about her conversation with Mrs. Caldwell. Oh, yeah, Emma said through a mouthful of syrup. Mrs. Caldwell came by yesterday when you were at work, Mom. She seemed really interested in Dad's office building and stuff. Celeste's coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. She came here? Uh-huh. Asked to see Dad's office space. Wanted to know about his clients. I told her Dad helps rich people keep their money safe from the government. Emma grinned at me. That's right, isn't it, Dad? Something like that, I said with a slight smile. Sweetheart, Celeste said, her face draining of color. In the span of 12 hours, she'd gone from feeling superior about her husband's boring job to realizing one of her closest friends was suddenly very interested in the details of that job. A smart woman would have started asking questions. Celeste just looked terrified. I need to run some errands, she announced, grabbing her purse and keys. Take care of the kids. She was out the door before I could respond, leaving Emma and me to finish breakfast in peaceful silence. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A text from Nora. Phase 2 initiated. Bryn Caldwell is officially on our team. Your wife just called her in a panic. I deleted the message and helped Emma with her science project. A volcano that would erupt with perfect timing, just like everything else in my life these days. By evening, Celeste was wound tighter than a watch spring. She kept checking her phone, kept looking at me sideways, like she was seeing a stranger. At dinner, she tried to probe about my work, asking questions she'd never bothered with in 15 years of marriage. So, Russell, she said, cutting her chicken with surgical precision. Exactly how many clients do you have? Enough, I replied. That's not really an answer. I looked up from my plate, meeting her eyes directly. It's the only answer you're going to get. The kitchen fell silent, except for the sound of Jake's fork against his plate. Even he could feel the tension crackling between us. I'm just trying to understand what you do all day, Celeste said. But her voice lacked its usual confidence. No, I said calmly. You're just now trying to understand what you've been ignoring for 15 years. Tuesday afternoon found me parked across from the Scottsdale Tennis Club, camera with telephoto lens resting on my passenger seat. Professional surveillance wasn't my usual line of work, but 15 years of analyzing financial patterns had taught me patience and attention to detail. People were remarkably predictable once you understood their routines. Celeste's silver BMW pulled into the lot at exactly 2:47 p.m., 17 minutes later than her usual lesson time. She emerged wearing white tennis attire that cost more than most people's monthly rent, moving with a nervous energy that suggested this wasn't just about improving her backhand. Dwayne Morrison was waiting by court 7, all bronzed muscle and calculated charm. The man had perfected the art of making wealthy women feel special while systematically emptying their bank accounts. He kissed Celeste's cheek, lingering contact that went beyond professional courtesy. Their lesson lasted exactly 43 minutes. I documented every moment, the way his hands guided her swing, how she laughed at his jokes, the casual touches that became increasingly intimate. When they moved toward the clubhouse bar, I knew the real show was about to begin. Through the telephoto lens, I watched them settle into a corner booth. Dwayne's hand covered hers across the table while she spoke animatedly, probably sharing more details about her boring husband and his lack of masculine appeal. What she didn't know was that her boring husband had spent the morning installing voice-activated recording software on her phone. My phone buzzed with a text from Nora. Phase 3 ready. Vivian Ashford wants to meet. Vivian Ashford was Dwayne's other conquest. A 60-year-old divorcee with oil money and a taste for younger men. According to Nora's research, she'd been funding Dwayne's lifestyle for 8 months, believing she was his only wealthy benefactor. Learning about Celeste was going to be educational. I watched Celeste and Dwayne leave the bar together, his hand on her lower back as they walked toward the parking lot. Instead of separating at their cars, she followed him toward his pickup truck. Amateur mistake. Anyone watching would see exactly what kind of lesson she was really getting. 20 minutes later, they emerged from the truck looking appropriately disheveled. Celeste checked her reflection in her phone screen, smoothing her hair and adjusting her clothes. Dwayne lit a cigarette, the picture of satisfaction. I had everything I needed, but I waited until she drove away before starting my engine. Real predators don't reveal themselves until the trap is completely set. That evening, Celeste came home with a glow of someone who thought she was getting away with murder. She kissed me hello, guilt wrapped in performance, and asked about my day like nothing had happened. Productive, I said, not looking up from my laptop. Very productive. She had no idea how productive it had really been. The meeting with Vivian Ashford took place at the Phoenician Resort in a private dining room that reeked of old money and older secrets. Vivian herself was exactly what I'd expected. Elegant, predatory, and absolutely furious once Nora showed her the photographs. "That little snake," she hissed, studying a picture of Dwayne kissing Celeste outside the tennis club. 8 months, I've been paying for his apartment, his car, his whole pathetic lifestyle. "Mrs. Ashford," Nora said smoothly, "we believe you and Mr. Doyle have common interests in resolving this situation." Vivian's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Oh, we absolutely do. I don't take kindly to being played for a fool, especially by some tennis gigolo and his desperate housewife." She opened her purse and pulled out a thick folder. "I've been documenting Dwayne's expenses for months. Every dinner, every gift, every weekend getaway he claimed was for professional development. If your wife thinks she's special, she's about to learn otherwise." The folder contained restaurant receipts, hotel bills, jewelry purchases, a complete financial history of Dwayne's operation. More importantly, it showed a pattern of fraud that could destroy him professionally and legally. "There's something else," Vivian continued, her smile turning predatory. "Dwayne's been skimming money from the club's private lesson fund, taking cash payments and not reporting them, claiming equipment purchases that never happened. The club's board would be very interested to learn about their star instructor's creative accounting." Nora leaned forward. "Are you willing to make a formal complaint?" "Honey, I'm willing to make his life a living hell. But I want something in return." She turned to me, her eyes calculating. "I want his wife to know exactly what she's been sharing. I want her to understand that she's not some irresistible temptress. She's just another mark in a con game." "That can be arranged," I said. "Good. Because tomorrow night, the club is hosting their annual charity gala. Dwayne will be there, working the room, probably lining up his next victim. Your wife will be there too, I assume." I nodded. Celeste had been preparing for the gala for weeks, treating it like her personal debutante ball. "Perfect," Vivian said. "I think it's time we gave everyone a show they won't forget." By the time I got home, Celeste was already asleep, her phone charging on the nightstand. I carefully lifted it, entered the passcode she thought I didn't know, and activated the final phase of our surveillance protocol. Tomorrow night, she would learn that her perfect little affair was about to become very public, very expensive, and very, very over. The trap was set. All that remained was watching it snap shut. The Scottsdale Tennis Club's annual charity gala was everything Celeste had dreamed of. Crystal chandeliers, designer gowns, and enough social currency to fund a small country. She'd spent hours preparing, selecting a black dress that cost more than most people's cars and jewelry that caught light like captured stars. "You look beautiful," I told her as we walked into the ballroom, and I meant it. She was stunning in the way that comes from desperation dressed as confidence. "Thank you," she replied, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. "There's Dwayne by the silent auction. I should go say hello." "Of course you should." She squeezed my arm, performance for the watching crowd, and glided away toward her lover. I watched her cross the room, noting how her entire body language changed as she approached him. The careful distance they maintained, the casual conversation that fooled no one who knew what to look for. Nora appeared at my elbow, elegant in navy blue silk. Everything's in position. Vivian's holding court by the bar, and our photographer has clear sight lines to the terrace. And Dr. Whitman, mingling with the other professionals. She's already spoken to 3 couples about your family stability and your dedication to the children. Word travels fast in social circles. I nodded, accepting a scotch from a passing waiter. "How long do we wait?" "Not long." Vivian's patience expired around the same time as her last alimony payment. Across the room, Celeste was laughing at something Dwayne had whispered in her ear. Her hand brushed his arm, subtle contact that would have been invisible to a casual observer. But Vivian Ashford was anything but casual. The older woman approached the couple like a cruise missile in designer shoes. Even from 30 feet away, I could see Dwayne's face go pale as Vivian inserted herself into their conversation. Celeste looked confused, then concerned, then absolutely horrified as Vivian began speaking. "Ladies and gentlemen," came Vivian's voice through the ballroom sound system. She'd somehow acquired a microphone, and her Texas drawl carried the authority of old money and older age. "I'd like to share a little story about charity. Specifically, the charity some of us show toward lying, cheating tennis instructors, and the married women who think they're special enough to share them." The ballroom fell silent except for the clink of crystal and the rustle of expensive fabric. Everyone turned toward the drama unfolding near the silent auction tables. "You see," Vivian continued, "some folks think they can play games with other people's hearts and wallets. But what they don't realize is that older women like me don't get rich by being stupid." Celeste was backing away from the microphone, her face cycling through every shade of pale. Dwayne looked like he wanted to disappear into the marble floor. "Mrs. Ashford," came a voice I recognized as the club president. Perhaps we should let everyone know exactly what kind of man they've been trusting with their wives and daughters," Vivian interrupted. "Because Dwayne Morrison here has been running quite the operation. The trap had sprung, and there was nowhere left to run." What followed was 20 minutes of public destruction that would have impressed a demolition expert. Vivian Ashford had come prepared with receipts, photographs, and the kind of righteous fury that only comes from discovering you've been played for a fool by someone half your age. 8 months, she announced to the captive audience. "I've been paying for his apartment, his car, his designer clothes. All while he was telling me I was the only woman who understood his artistic soul." She gestured toward Celeste, who was now pressed against a pillar, like she was trying to become part of the architecture. And apparently, I wasn't the only one hearing that particular line. The photographs were damning. Dwayne with Celeste, Dwayne with 2 other club members' wives, Dwayne depositing checks from multiple women into his personal account. Professional suicide in glossy 8x10 format. "Mrs. Doyle," Vivian called out, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent ballroom. "I believe you, and I need to have a conversation about sharing resources." Celeste's mouth moved, but no sound emerged. She looked toward me with desperate eyes, seeking rescue that wasn't coming. I raised my scotch glass in a small salute and smiled. The club president finally managed to wrest the microphone away from Vivian, but the damage was complete. Dwayne had fled toward the exit, leaving behind a wake of shocked whispers and ruined reputations. Half the room was staring at Celeste with barely concealed satisfaction. Social circles love nothing more than watching someone fall from grace. Dr. Whitman appeared beside me, as if summoned by telepathy. "Quite the evening," she observed. "Indeed. I trust this provides sufficient context for your evaluation?" "More than sufficient. A woman who would engage in such behavior while representing her family in public demonstrates remarkably poor judgment. Family courts take that sort of thing very seriously." Celeste finally found her voice and mobility, pushing through the crowd toward us. Her carefully applied makeup had smudged, and her designer dress suddenly looked like costume jewelry under the chandelier lights. "Russell," she hissed, grabbing my arm. "We need to leave." "Now why?" I asked calmly. "The evening's just getting interesting." "Because everyone's staring. Because this is humiliating. Because you've been exposed as a cheater and a fool." I finished. "I don't see how leaving changes any of that." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. For 15 years, I'd been her enabler, her protector, the man who smoothed over her mistakes and cleaned up her messes. This new version of her husband, the one who stood calmly sipping scotch while her world burned, was completely foreign territory. "We'll discuss this at home," she said, her voice shaking. "No," I replied. "We won't. Because by the time you get home, the locks will be changed, and your belongings will be on the front lawn." The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Around us, the party continued with a kind of forced normalcy that follows public disasters. "You can't do this," she whispered. I leaned close enough that only she could hear my response. "Watch me." The house felt different when I returned that night. Like the air itself had shifted. Celeste's car wasn't in the driveway. She'd gone to her sister's, according to the text she'd sent. The kids were at their grandparents', safely away from the fallout zone their mother had created. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my study, reviewing the legal documents Nora had prepared. Everything was ready. The divorce filing, custody arrangements, financial disclosures that would leave Celeste with exactly what she contributed to our marriage. Nothing significant. My phone rang at midnight. Celeste's name appeared on the screen, but I let it go to voicemail. She called 6 more times before finally leaving a message that alternated between rage and desperation. Russell, you can't do this. Those people at the gala, they don't understand. Dwayne and I, it wasn't what it looked like. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. We have 15 years together. Think about the kids. I deleted the message without finishing it. Thursday morning brought Dr. Whitman to my office with her final evaluation. She sat across from my desk like a judge delivering a verdict, her expression professionally neutral, but somehow satisfied. Based on my observations, she said, opening her leather portfolio, I'm prepared to recommend that you receive primary custody of both children. Your wife's behavior demonstrates a pattern of poor judgment that extends beyond marital infidelity. How so? I asked. She's willing to expose her children to unstable situations for her own gratification. The affair itself is damaging enough, but conducting it so publicly, involving family friends, using the family home, these are the actions of someone who prioritizes her desires over her children's well-being. She handed me a sealed envelope. My report documents everything. The surveillance evidence, the financial irregularities, witness statements from people who observe her behavior. No family court judge will award significant custody to a parent who's demonstrated such reckless disregard for family stability. That afternoon, Nora filed the papers. Within 2 hours, Celeste was served at her sister's house. Her phone calls resumed immediately. 23 missed calls in 4 hours, each voicemail more frantic than the last. By evening, she was standing on my doorstep, looking like she'd aged a decade in 3 days. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her perfect makeup smudged, her confidence completely shattered. Russell, please, she said when I opened the door. We need to talk. No, I replied calmly. We don't. Your lawyer can talk to my lawyer. The kids need their mother. The kids need stability. You forfeited your right to provide that when you decided Dwayne Morrison was more important than your family. She started crying then. Real tears. Not the performance variety she'd perfected over the years. I never meant for it to go this far. I was lonely. I felt unappreciated. I made terrible choices. Yes, I agreed. You did. But we can fix this, she said. I'll end things with Dwayne. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. I looked at her standing on the porch that had once been her home, reduced to begging for a second chance she'd thrown away months ago. Celeste, I said quietly, some things can't be fixed. Some choices can't be undone. You chose your path. I closed the door and walked away from 15 years of marriage without looking back. 6 months later, I stood in the same restaurant where it all began. But everything had changed. Romano still served overpriced food to Scottsdale's social elite. But I was no longer the invisible husband enduring his wife's cruel entertainment. Emma and Jake were with me. Our weekly dinner tradition had become one of my favorite parts of single fatherhood. They'd adjusted to the divorce better than I'd expected, probably because their daily lives had actually become more stable, not less. Emma said, cutting her chicken with the precision she'd inherited from me. Mrs. Patterson asked if you were dating anyone. Mrs. Patterson was her math teacher, recently divorced herself, and apparently fishing for information about my availability. Why do you ask? Because Nora's really nice, Jake chimed in. And she makes you smile differently than Mom. Out of the mouths of babes. Nora and I had transitioned from professional partnership to something more personal. Once the divorce was finalized, it turned out that shared competence was a powerful aphrodisiac, and mutual respect made an excellent foundation for whatever we were building together. Speak of the devil, I said, seeing Nora's Mercedes pull into the parking lot. She entered the restaurant like she owned it, confident and elegant in a way that came from genuine achievement rather than borrowed status. The hostess led her to our table, where she kissed my cheek and ruffled Jake's hair with easy familiarity. How was court today? She asked, settling into her chair. Productive, I replied. Celeste's appeal was denied. The custody arrangement stands.